Welcome back to Askewed Reviews, and this week we are doing a theme, and that is 80s fantasy movies. So today we are starting off with the 1982 adventure fantasy, The Dark Crystal. Here is your trivia question for today. Early drafts of the script had a scene that never made it into the film, but would inspire a different Jim Henson creation. What creation was this? The answer will be at the end of this video. So, in the world of the Dark Crystal, we seem to have two factions: the good side, which is represented by the Mystics, and the evil side, represented by the Skeksis. Now, the Skeksis are currently in possession of the Dark Crystal, which they are planning on using in some horrible way to be able to control the world. Jen, who is the last of the Gelflings, as the Skeksis have killed off the rest, is the only one who apparently can stop what's going on here and save the day. So a few events in the world start to kick things off. For instance, the Emperor of the Skeksis passes away, and a new one is chosen due to trial by stone. At the same time, the Elder Mystic passes away, notifying Jen of his journey that he must take on. To begin his journey, he must go seek out Agra and collect a shard of crystal from her. After collecting the shard and continuing on his way, Jen has quite the surprise introduction, as he meets another Gelfling named Kira, and her little pet named Fizzgig. Now, unlike Jen, who is raised by the Mystics, Kira is raised by the Podlings. Now, our Gelfling duo is on a bit of a time crunch, as the three moons are about to converge and start the Great Conjunction. Will Jen and Kira be able to restore the shard to the Dark Crystal and save their world? So this film was directed by both Jim Henson and Frank Oz. Jim Henson's main goal with this film was to make it feel like the classic Grimm's fairy tales, where it felt like a classic fairy tale, but there was dark tones throughout the entire thing. They didn't start working on this film until after the Muppet movie came out, but it was being filmed at the same time as The Great Muppet Caper. Jim Henson initially named the planet in this film Mithra, but it was apparently too close to the name of a Persian god, so then they called it Nithra. And after not really liking it that much, they then changed it to Thra. Brian Froud was actually the one who designed most of the concepts for this film. He at one point sent a concept design of what the Dark Crystal would look like to Jim Henson. Henson was very confused and wondered where the crystal came from. Apparently, the actual title that he told Froud was that it was the Dark Chrysalis, but there was some confusion. In the end, though, Henson liked the idea of the crystal much more, and they kept that in. The concept of what the mystics looked like actually was already created by Froud. He made a book called The Land of Froud and had these creatures called trolls in them. Now, he did want to keep his original concept and not have to share that with anyone else, so when he designed what the mystics looked like, he added extra arms, so that way there would be a difference between them. When creating what the Skeksis looked like, they were originally told to make it look like crocodiles that lived in a castle. So I don't know how we ended up with getting vulture-like creatures, but okay. Now, originally, the Mystics and the Skeksis were originally going to speak different languages that the audience couldn't understand. But after kind of rewatching stuff back, they realized how boring that would be, so they made sure everything was in English. I couldn't find any explanation as to why the Gelflings look the way they do, other than probably making them similar to traditional elves. But apparently, the reason why Fizzgig appears in the movie is Frank Oz always liked the idea of Miss Piggy having Foo-Foo and thought having an animal companion in the same way for Kira would be great. The concept for Agra actually comes from the Stygian witches from Greek mythology. The concept for the podlings was actually to make them look like potatoes. They were even supposed to have multiple eyes, just like how potatoes do, but they realized just how utterly creepy that would be. Froud was actually quite inspired by crustaceans when coming up with the concept of the Garthams. Now, the Gartham outfit was actually so heavy that the actors actually had to hang themselves up on these racks between scenes just so that the weight wouldn't pull them down to the ground. Oh, one more little note about a specific Skeksis. The one that has this odd eye here, the eye is actually made from a TIE fighter toy. It's the centerpiece. To create all the creatures in this film, it actually took around 9 tons of rubber. Now, the Skeksis puppets actually were used once again as Holosians in the series Farscape. This film is actually quite the masterpiece and so beautiful. Everything from the plants to the animals, to the different characters, and even the locations that are used. Now, if you can't get enough of The Dark Crystal, there's lots of options, including a prequel TV series on Netflix called The Dark Crystal Age of Resistance. There's even a video game based off of that series called The Dark Crystal Age of Resistance Tactics. There are plenty of comic books and novels to read through as well, a tabletop RPG, and even a board game. The Dark Crystal is a must see fantasy film from the 80s and will probably go down in history as probably one of the best, if not the best, puppet movies ever created. So I'm going to give this one a 5 out of 5. Now, as for the trivia question from the beginning of this episode, early drafts of the script had a scene that never made it into the film, but would inspire a different Jim Henson creation. What creation was this? So, in the original script, there was a sequence where Jen and Kira go into an underground section of the world and run into some creatures that inhabit that area. Now, that didn't end up showing up in the film, but that spun off into an idea that Jim Henson had and now is known as Fraggle Rock. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Askewed Reviews. If there's a movie you'd like to see get a review, just mention it in the comments. And as always, like, comment, share, and subscribe.